The morning sun streamed through the towering glass windows of Blackwood International, casting long shadows across the polished marble floors. Olivia Parker clutched her tablet closer to her chest as she hurried through the maze-like corridors of the corporate headquarters. Her first day as the company's new lead translator was not going as planned. Running 10 minutes late for the morning briefing, she barely noticed the signs as she rushed down an unfamiliar hallway. The urgent need for a restroom break only added to her mounting anxiety. When she spotted a door marked with what looked like a restroom symbol, she pushed through without a second thought. The luxurious interior should have been her first clue that something was amiss. Instead of the standard corporate bathroom she expected, she found herself in what appeared to be a private spa area. The air was heavy with the scent of eucalyptus, and soft classical music played from hidden speakers. "This can't be right," she muttered, turning to leave, but fate had other plans. The sound of running water stopped abruptly, and before Olivia could retreat, a tall figure emerged from around the corner. James Blackwood, CEO of Blackwood International, stood before her in nothing but a towel, water still dripping from his broad shoulders. Time seemed to freeze as their eyes met. Olivia's breath caught in her throat as recognition dawned on both their faces. She had seen his photos in the company newsletters and annual reports, but they didn't do justice to his commanding presence. "This is a private executive spa," he stated, his voice cool and controlled despite the situation. "Care to explain why you're here?" Olivia's mind raced for a plausible explanation. I was looking for the restroom. I'm new here and got lost." She gestured vaguely toward the door, trying desperately to keep her eyes fixed on his face rather than his well-defined physique. "The employee restrooms are 2 floors down," he replied, raising an eyebrow. "This floor is restricted access only." "I'm so sorry, Mr. Blackwood. I'm Olivia Parker, your new lead translator. It's my first day, and I was running late for the morning briefing," she trailed off, realizing she was rambling. A flash of recognition crossed his features. "Miss Parker, you're the one with the impressive credentials from Geneva." Yes, sir. Though right now I'm feeling more like an embarrassed intern than a qualified professional." She attempted a self-deprecating smile, hoping to diffuse the tension. James's expression remained unreadable as he studied her. "The briefing starts in 5 minutes. I suggest you find your way to the correct floor and appropriate facilities quickly." "Of course, right away." Olivia turned to leave, but her heel caught on the plush carpet. She stumbled forward, instinctively reaching out to catch herself. Her hand landed squarely on James's chest, and for a brief moment, she felt his heart racing beneath her palm. Their eyes met again, and this time, something electric passed between them. James's hand had automatically moved to steady her, gripping her elbow with surprising gentleness. "I'm sorry," she whispered, pulling away as if burned. "This is not how I planned to make my first impression." A hint of amusement flickered across his face, gone so quickly she might have imagined it. "No, I suppose it wasn't. We'll discuss your navigation skills later, Miss Parker. For now, you have a meeting to attend." Olivia nodded and practically fled from the room, her cheeks burning with embarrassment. As she finally found her way to the correct floor and meeting room, she couldn't shake the feeling that her life at Blackwood International was going to be anything but ordinary. What she didn't see was James watching her leave, a thoughtful expression replacing his usual stern demeanor. For the first time in years, something had managed to crack his carefully maintained facade of indifference. Whether that was a good thing remained to be seen. Testing her limits. The following week proved that James Blackwood hadn't forgotten their awkward first encounter. Olivia found herself drowning in an avalanche of work, each task more demanding than the last. It became clear that he was testing her limits, perhaps hoping she would crack under pressure. A stack of contracts landed on her desk early Monday morning, accompanied by a terse note in James's precise handwriting, complete by noon. No errors. The documents were complex legal agreements in German, Mandarin, and Arabic, requiring not just translation but cultural adaptation for each market. Olivia squared her shoulders and dove into the work. She might have made a fool of herself in their first meeting, but she hadn't earned her reputation by backing down from challenges. Her fingers flew across the keyboard as she meticulously translated each document, cross-referencing industry-specific terms and ensuring cultural nuances were preserved. At exactly 11:55 a.m., she walked into James's office with the completed translations. He looked up from his computer, surprise briefly flickering across his features before his usual mask of indifference returned. "You're early," he remarked, accepting the stack of documents. "I allowed time for review," Olivia replied calmly, though her heart was racing under his scrutiny. James began examining the translations, his expression growing increasingly frustrated as he failed to find any significant errors. Finally, he set the papers down and fixed her with an intense stare. "Your technical skills match your credentials," he conceded. "But let's see how you handle pressure in real time." The next day, Olivia found herself thrown into a video conference with Japanese investors, translating complex financial terms with no preparation. She maintained her composure, even when James deliberately used obscure industry jargon to test her knowledge. As days passed, the challenges grew more demanding. James would schedule last-minute meetings requiring her to translate hours of technical discussions with little notice. He'd drop urgent documents on her desk moments before she was planning to leave for the day, watching with barely concealed interest as she tackled each task without complaint. But Olivia wasn't just surviving, she was thriving. Her quick wit and adaptability began to earn respect from other executives, who noticed how she could seamlessly switch between languages while maintaining the nuanced meaning of complex negotiations. One particular afternoon, during a crucial meeting with German investors, James was surprised to hear Olivia not just translating his words but subtly improving them. She added cultural context and smoothed over potential misunderstandings before they could arise, all while maintaining the essence of his message. After the meeting, he called her into his office. Olivia entered, expecting another impossible task. Instead, she found him standing by the window, his usual stern expression replaced by something more contemplative. "You changed my phrasing during the meeting," he stated, turning to face her. "I adapted it for cultural context," she corrected. The direct translation would have seemed too aggressive to German sensibilities. "I maintained your message while ensuring it would be received as intended." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Most translators wouldn't dare take such initiative. "Most translators haven't accidentally walked in on their boss in a private spa," she replied before she could stop herself. "I figured my career here couldn't get more precarious." To her astonishment, James actually chuckled. The sound was rich and warm, completely transforming his usually severe features. For a moment, Olivia caught a glimpse of the man behind the corporate mask, someone younger and more approachable than his reputation suggested. "You continue to surprise me, Miss Parker," he said, his voice softer than she'd ever heard it. Their eyes met, and that same electric tension from their first encounter crackled between them. Olivia felt her breath catch as she noticed details she'd been trying to ignore, the way his shirt stretched across his broad shoulders, how his eyes weren't just brown but flecked with gold, the subtle scent of his cologne. The moment was broken by his phone ringing. James turned away to answer it, his business persona snapping back into place. Olivia took the opportunity to retreat, but as she reached the door, his voice stopped her. "Miss Parker," she turned back. "Yes. Good work today." The words were simple, but coming from James Blackwood, they felt like high praise. As Olivia walked back to her desk, she couldn't help but smile. She was beginning to understand that James's tests weren't just about proving her professional worth, they were his way of keeping people at a distance. The question was, how long could he maintain that distance when she kept exceeding his every expectation? The answer would come sooner than either of them expected, bringing with it revelations that would shake the foundations of their carefully maintained professional relationship. The Charity Gala. The annual Blackwood International Charity Gala transformed the company's austere headquarters into a glittering wonderland. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbow reflections across the marble floors, and the air hummed with classical music and quiet conversation. Olivia stood near the refreshment table, feeling somewhat out of place in her midnight blue evening gown. Her role tonight was to assist with international guests, but so far, the evening had been quiet. She watched as James worked the room, moving from group to group with practiced ease. He looked particularly handsome in his tailored tuxedo, though she noticed the slight tension in his shoulders that betrayed his discomfort with such social occasions. Everything changed when the waiters began circulating with champagne trays. Olivia observed as James's entire demeanor shifted, his jaw tightened, and his knuckles turned white around his water glass. When a waiter approached him with champagne, he recoiled so subtly that most wouldn't have noticed, but Olivia did. She watched as he excused himself from his current conversation and slipped out onto the balcony. Without really thinking about why, she followed him. The night air was cool and carried the scent of blooming jasmine from the corporate gardens below. James stood at the railing, his back rigid, his breathing slightly uneven. He didn't turn when she approached, but she knew he was aware of her presence. "You should be inside," he said, his voice rougher than usual. "There might be guests who need translation." "They can wait," Olivia replied softly. She moved to stand beside him, careful to maintain a professional distance. "What is it about champagne?" He turned to her sharply, surprise and something like fear flickering across his features. "You noticed that?" "I notice a lot of things about you," she admitted. "It's part of my job to read people, to understand what's not being said." James was quiet for so long that she thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was distant, as if coming from somewhere deep in the past. 5 years ago, I was at a gala much like this one. My wife Rebecca was there, and our daughter Emma. He paused, his hands gripping the railing. We were celebrating a major merger. Everyone had champagne. I was giving a toast when we got the call. There had been an explosion at one of our research facilities. Olivia's heart clenched as she began to understand. "Your family. They found evidence of sabotage, a rival company trying to steal our research data. The explosion was meant to be a distraction, but something went wrong," his voice cracked slightly. "I was here, raising a champagne glass, while my family was." He couldn't finish the sentence. Without thinking, Olivia reached out and placed her hand over his on the railing. His skin was cold, but he didn't pull away. "That's why you push everyone away," she said softly. "Why you test people so hard." He turned to look at her, and in the moonlight, she could see the raw pain in his eyes. The merger partner turned out to be behind it all. Someone I trusted, someone I considered a friend. After that, I learned that trust is a luxury I can't afford. "But it's killing you inside," Olivia whispered. "Living without trust, without connection, it's not really living at all." Their eyes met, and for a moment, all the barriers between them seemed to dissolve. James looked at her as if seeing her for the first time, really seeing her. His hand turned beneath hers, their fingers intertwining almost of their own accord. "How do you do that?" he asked, his voice barely audible. "Do what?" "See through every wall I put up. Understand things I've never said." Olivia felt her heart racing but forced herself to hold his gaze. "Maybe because I'm not trying to see the CEO of Blackwood International. I'm just seeing you, James." He drew in a sharp breath at the sound of his first name on her lips. They stood there, hands joined, hearts beating in sync, while the party continued inside. It was a moment of perfect understanding, of walls crumbling and truths being revealed. But then a burst of laughter from inside shattered the spell. James pulled his hand away and stepped back, his professional mask sliding back into place. Yet something had changed. Olivia had seen behind that mask, had touched the real man beneath it. As they returned to the gala separately, both knew their relationship had shifted irrevocably. The question was no longer whether they could maintain professional distance, but whether they could survive the inevitable collision of their personal and professional worlds. Paris interlude. The Paris business trip wasn't supposed to be complicated. 3 days of negotiations with French investors, standard contract reviews, and then back to New York. But from the moment their private jet touched down at Charles de Gaulle Airport, something felt different between Olivia and James. Perhaps it was the lingering effect of their conversation at the gala, or maybe it was simply being away from the familiar confines of Blackwood International. Whatever the cause, the careful distance they'd maintained began to crack. The first day of meetings went smoothly. Olivia's French was impeccable, and she navigated the cultural intricacies of European business with practiced ease. James found himself watching her more than he should, noticing the graceful way she shifted between languages, how her eyes lit up when she smiled, the subtle ways she anticipated his needs before he could voice them. It was during a break between meetings that Thomas Laurent, one of the French executives, approached Olivia. His interest was obvious, his flirtation barely professional. James watched from across the room, his jaw tightening as Laurent touched Olivia's arm while complimenting her translation skills. "Mr. Laurent seems quite taken with you," James commented later as they rode the elevator to their rooms. His tone was carefully neutral, but Olivia didn't miss the tension underneath. "He's being typically French," she replied, studying James's reflection in the mirrored walls. All charm, no substance. Before James could respond, the elevator shuddered violently and ground to a halt. The lights flickered once, twice, then died, replaced by dim emergency lighting that cast everything in an eerie blue glow. Perfect, James muttered, pressing the emergency button. The response was quick but not encouraging, a citywide power issue, at least an hour before they could get the elevator moving again. Olivia leaned against the wall, trying to steady her breathing. Well, this is familiar. The last time I was the one intruding on your space. James's lips twitched in what might have been a smile. You've certainly made a habit of ending up in enclosed spaces with me. At least you're fully dressed this time, she quipped, then immediately blushed. I'm sorry, that was inappropriate. You apologize too much, he said softly, moving to stand beside her. The elevator suddenly felt much smaller. They stood in comfortable silence for a while, but Olivia could feel the tension building. There were too many unspoken words between them, too many moments of almost something that never quite materialized. Why did it bother you? She finally asked. What? Laurent. The way he was flirting with me. I saw your expression. James turned to face her, his eyes intense in the dim light. You know why? Do I? Her heart was pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. He moved closer to her, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. Ever since the day you walked into the spa, you've been breaking down every wall I've built. And the most infuriating part is that you don't even seem to realize you're doing it. James. She breathed, but he wasn't finished. I tried to push you away. Gave you impossible tasks, tested your limits, looked for any flaw that would give me a reason to keep my distance. But you exceeded every expectation. You saw through every defense. And now, she whispered. Instead of answering, he reached up and traced her cheek with his fingertips. Olivia's breath caught at the tender gesture. This was James Blackwood, the man who never showed weakness, never revealed emotion, yet here he was, looking at her with such raw vulnerability it made her heart ache. I haven't felt anything for anyone since I lost my family, he admitted quietly. I didn't want to. It was easier to be numb, to focus only on the company, to keep everyone at arm's length. But you. He drew in a shaky breath. You make me want to feel again, and that terrifies me. Olivia reached up and covered his hand with hers, holding it against her cheek. Being scared of feeling doesn't mean you stop feeling. It just means you're brave enough to recognize what you're risking. The space between them seemed to disappear. James's free hand found her waist, drawing her closer. Olivia's fingers curled into the lapels of his suit jacket. They were breathing the same air, sharing the same heartbeat. The final test. The merger negotiations were supposed to be routine. Blackwood International was acquiring a smaller tech company, and everything had been proceeding smoothly. But as Olivia sat beside James in the conference room, something felt off about the way the other company's CEO, Richard Morrison, kept smirking during the discussions. Their dinner in Paris had changed everything between them. Though they maintained strict professionalism at work, only subtle glances and brief touches betrayed the depth of their growing connection. But today, that connection would prove more valuable than either could have imagined. As Morrison presented his company's financials, Olivia noticed something in his German correspondence that made her blood run cold. She had been translating documents all week, and certain phrases kept appearing in different languages, phrases that seemed innocuous unless you knew what to look for. While translating Morrison's words into Mandarin for the Chinese investors present, Olivia carefully passed a note to James, "Need to speak privately. Urgent." James's expression didn't change, but he called for a brief recess. In his private office, Olivia's hands trembled as she spread out the documents. The coding in these contracts, she explained, pointing to specific phrases in different languages. They're similar to what investigators found in the documents from 5 years ago. The ones from the merger that. She hesitated, knowing this would hurt him. The one that killed my family, James finished, his voice tight. Are you certain? Yes. Morrison's company, it's a shell corporation. The same people who were behind the sabotage 5 years ago, they're trying to gain control of Blackwood International from the inside. James's face went pale, then hardened with fury. They've been planning this for years. Waiting for the right moment. He slammed his fist on the desk. I should have seen it. Olivia touched his arm gently. You couldn't have known. But we can stop them now. He looked at her, really looked at her, and something shifted in his expression. We. Yes, we. You're not alone anymore, James. She squeezed his hand. And I have a plan. When they returned to the conference room, everything was different. James began speaking about the merger terms, with Olivia translating into multiple languages for the international investors. But her translations were carefully crafted, exposing the hidden meanings in Morrison's documents while appearing to simply convey business terms. Morrison's smirk began to fade as he realized what was happening. The international investors started whispering among themselves, recognizing the coded phrases that Olivia was cleverly highlighting. Is something wrong, Mr. Morrison? James asked, his voice deadly calm. You look uncomfortable. Morrison's face contorted with rage. You have no proof of anything. Actually, Olivia interjected, sliding forward a stack of translated documents, we have proof in 6 different languages. Every coded message, every hidden clause, every connection to the shell companies involved in the incident 5 years ago. The room erupted into chaos. Morrison tried to flee but was stopped by security. The investors demanded explanations, and evidence was presented to the authorities who had been quietly summoned. Hours later, after the dust had settled and statements had been given, James found Olivia in her office. She was still there, organizing the evidence for the investigation. You saved my company, he said quietly, closing the door behind him. I saved more than that, she replied, turning to face him. I saved you from letting them hurt you again. James crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled her into his arms. This time there was no hesitation, no holding back. His lips found hers in a kiss that spoke of gratitude, admiration, and something much deeper. When they finally parted, James rested his forehead against hers. When you first walked into that spa, I thought you were going to be nothing but trouble. Olivia laughed softly. I was the best kind of trouble. His expression grew serious. I spent 5 years building walls, convinced that letting anyone close would only lead to more pain. But you didn't try to break down those walls. You simply showed me that it was safe to open the door. And now, she asked, her heart racing. Now I'm done hiding. Done being afraid to feel. He cupped her face in his hands. I love you, Olivia Parker. Not just for saving my company, but for saving me. For showing me that trust isn't a weakness and that love is worth the risk. Tears shimmered in Olivia's eyes. I love you too. All of you, the stern CEO, the wounded man, the person you're becoming who isn't afraid to feel anymore.